I hope you've all had a chance to meet Barry and Patty Abrahamsen. They're making a debut, relatively recent arrivals here, and Barry was talking to me about something called the Gutenberg project that made me perk up my ears. So I distributed proofreading. So I persuaded him that if I'm interested in this, a lot of the other residents are going to be interested too. And he's here now to talk to us about it with illustrations.
I have this little hobby horse I ride about public domain books and other public domain photos, movies, things like that. And about maybe 15 years ago, I discovered this nonprofit organization who was turning books that are no longer in the public domain into text, movies, sound that can be distributed freely. And I have a little history about that. Actually, Patty put it together. This is even weirder. Then, of course, I retired, COVID happened, and I kept spending more and more time working on this nonprofit effort to digitize as many books as possible. And it started out in the United States, but now has escaped to Canada and at least Germany and a few other countries, where each country is trying to digitize as much of their local writers' books as possible. The process, I couldn't describe it as fascinating, but I found it really interesting, and I learned a lot. And so I'd like to give you a fairly quick overview of what goes into it and then what comes out. So on the screen is a book I worked on about Hans Holbein, and you can see here, this is the title page, and you can keep scrolling back. And then the table of contents, an appendix, and list of illustrations. All the parts of the book that you'd expect to find, and then finally eventually there'll be some text there somewhere. The actual book. Okay, there it is. Huh? So this is the output from the process that I went through to digitize the book. I didn't do it all by myself. No one could do one book all by themselves, I think. And I don't even know who helped me. It's all kind of anonymous. Not that it needs to be, but it is. It ends up being anonymous. Then, can you switch to the other window? Okay.
Can you turn the lights down?
The lights down.
Oh. Okay. These are the instructions for formatting that book. Keep scrolling out, buddy. Can you?
Doesn't seem to want to scroll.
It's going so well for a few seconds there. So, most of you are familiar with the other version of this, which is HTML, which creates websites. And this is like that, exactly the same process, only the final output is a book and not a website. They all use something called HTTP for the definition of the parts, and it gets complicated quickly. However, I'm not going to talk about that, but as a brief introduction. So all this stuff is the text that then is processed, and the HTML that represents the book is output, and then you sell the book. If you do this long enough, you can do it accurately, I guess is the right way. You have to learn what instructions to give to get the picture formatted correctly, to center a paragraph, to make a paragraph into a footnote or something, things like that. Okay, now I'm going to switch to my little talk. Does anybody have any questions to begin with here? Okay. Likewise, not with this process, but we'll see what happens. So, Patty helpfully typed up my notes so I wouldn't fumble too badly. The Distributed Proofreaders is a nonprofit organization. Everybody's a nonprofit here. No one makes any money off this. It was created in 2000. This project Gutenberg was created in about 2000, although there were some efforts before that. And it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and now, I guess it must be more than that by now. On the Project Gutenberg website, there are 48,000 titles, all publicly named books. It started in 1971 by an American, and he formed the book, this effort with a very small amount of money. I guess that's what I want to say. By the mid-1990s, which is not too long after that, I guess, he was running this project Gutenberg from the university he was attending, and he was the only contributor. And so he manually did all the typing, entry, and formatting. Then other people began to join him. There was somebody who volunteered to be the website editor for the Project Gutenberg, and we'll show the website later, I think. And since then, the effort has won several awards for things like the best website, which is kind of hard to believe, but okay. And now, as of August, 2 years ago, so it's quite out of date, there was 72,500 items. And about 50 new books are added each week. It is a very large organization, but it's a very distributed and invisible organization. So there are people all over the world who are contributing to this, even though they have no obvious, benefit except their own satisfaction. When I was working on a couple of books, I worked with somebody in South Africa who was working on one of the books that I had produced and had questions about it, and that was sort of fun. And I needed help with some Greek. So even if the books are all in English, occasionally there are passages in Greek or Hebrew or Chinese, and I can't read those things. So I found a volunteer in Greece, and she helped me with a lot of work and research. And we got to be talking about our families and what it was like during COVID and things. So we weren't friends, but it was pleasant to talk to her. So right now, in addition to English, most of the books are either French, that's the majority, German, Finnish for some reason, Dutch, Italian, and Portuguese. Some of those surprise me. Let's see, in the last 15 years or so. Okay, so that's it. Okay. There isn't much of a speech that goes with this. So you're all probably familiar with things like Kindle, and there's one called the Nook, and there must be 5, 6, 7, 8 others, which are particular to some bookstore or publishing house. And although they're different, and have different motivations, I guess, they want to sell books. They typically have some public domain or inexpensive books for sale in electronic format, because it costs them nothing to do that. And most of the e-readers are connected with a bookstore or a publisher. but not all of them. And in the little handout, I think I noted some of those. But almost any computer, whether it's a laptop, a phone, or an iPad or something like that, can be an e-reader, and you don't have to have a specific device that is used just for reading books. I read almost all my books on my iPad, and I find that a better format. You can see more text at once, and I find it easier to navigate. If you have any questions, it would be very helpful to me to hear what you have to say. Yes?
So how do books get chosen?
Nobody's going to be able to hear you unless I bring this to you.
Oh, okay. How do books get chosen to be put into the Project Gutenberg?
Thank you. That was a very apt question. The website that I volunteer with is called Distributed Proofreading, and it's made up of different people who have different functions. And one of the functions is project manager. And a project manager pretty much can do whatever he or she wants. And so if the project manager is fascinated by the facts of dairy production in Minnesota in the 19th century, he can find a book that's out of copyright. They can start a project and do it. So, since everybody's volunteer and they all have different priorities and interests, just whatever they want to do. They may not find a lot of people interested in quantifying statistics for dairy production in Minnesota in the 19th century, but somebody will be interested and be willing to do it. The least interesting thing I think I've worked on, and I didn't do a lot, but I contributed, was something like an annual report of the schools in Cincinnati, I think, in 1920s maybe, talking about enrollment across all the schools in the city, how much money was spent on construction, maintenance, teaching, how many students were in each class, how many different classes there were, opportunities, problems. Nobody cares, but somebody cared enough, just enough, to turn this into a project. And so the project manager starts it off by scanning every page in the book on a flatbed scanner. You've seen those things in use. And then there's different software called optical character recognition, which takes each scanned page, takes one scanned page at a time, and turns the characters on the page into text. So it went from perhaps, I don't know, Palantino 12 bold to nothing, just A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So it strips off any of the font formatting information. So that's plain text. I actually had a little talk about that, but I didn't think it was that interesting, so I took it out.
Okay, Suzanne has a question.
Oh.
Before you even start, how do you know if the book's already been done or not? And is there somebody you can partner with?
Yes. So the project manager thought this was an interesting thing. Some project manager thought this was an interesting thing and put the work into producing the digital files for the book and just entered the book in, along with the files, into a catalog of what work is pending. And no one has any say that says no, which is kind of an interesting thing. There's no one who says this is worthwhile doing. Otherwise, we wouldn't find out about dairy production in Minnesota in the 19th century. Okay. So it's up to each individual. Each individual person is qualified as project manager. And once they've selected a book, actually, I missed a step here. Once they've selected a book, they run it by some lawyers. I'm not sure you'll be able to believe this, but there are lawyers who don't charge for determining whether a book is out of copyright in the United States, and that's all that matters. We're not producing books for any other location, and so this group of lawyers, I don't have any idea how many there are, but there must be 10 or 15 lawyers, will review each book and check to see when it was published and references to renewing the copyright. And if there's no copyright restrictions anymore on the book, then they just put it out. They list it in a catalog, actually, is what I have to say. They list the book in a catalog on the website. And then it shows up on a web page saying this book is available for people to start proofreading. And then people who are fascinated about dairy cows or construction will read the pages and start turning them into the text that's necessary. The plain text is there, but two things happen. First, the scanners don't always work really well, and secondly, the text may not be so great. I worked on one book that I think was printed in the 17th or early 18th century, and it had taken a beating. And it was very difficult sometimes to work out the text. So scanning that book ended up with a lot of stuff that was not right. So I had to go through and make the text of the book, which I had an image of, a picture of on my left side of the screen, match the stuff on the right side, which was supposed to be the transcribed text. I think there's a little bit more to be said about that, but maybe it's even less interesting than that. Does anybody else have a question?
Al wants to say something.
Maybe this is a side issue, but is any of this technology able to translate cursive into regular text?
The software that's used is particular to each project manager, because they do the work themselves and they own the equipment or something. So I don't know, and I would expect not. There are so many idiosyncratic ways that people write.
Okay.
I can't believe anybody would ever be able to automate scanning my text the way I write. Who knows though, maybe artificial intelligence that has made a lot of progress in understanding voice would be able to also understand scribbly text. Was there another question? Yes?
When does a book become a book? I mean, we have children's books that are mostly picture books with a few words, and we have other books that have graphs in them and so forth, and the graphs themselves are of interest. And how many pages do you give it? I only do books that have more than 6 pages or something. I mean, when's a book a book?
I honestly don't know about the lower end of that. I assume a single page is turned into an entry, and not maybe considered a book, but it could be valuable, and so maybe the Declaration of Independence is there somewhere. I haven't run into an upper limit on anything that I've worked on. I think the longer the book, when it gets to be 900 or 1,200 pages, then you don't find so many people anxious to help. It's just so tedious. And I've been Tolstoy, yeah. I'm sure that somebody has done Tolstoy, but I haven't tried any of that myself. Okay. So the handout I gave, you picked up at the door, gives a list of 8, not necessarily a comprehensive list, but a list of 8 places where you can get free copies of books. And some may be a little surprising. The Library of Congress has a large catalog of books, and I'm not sure what they're aiming at. I looked at it just a little bit, just so I could include it here. The Seattle Public Library has a very nice collection of electronic books and audio books. And if you have used their services, you know they have a large group. They have a group of employees who are very enthusiastic about helping people getting going with their e-readers. And then there's Gutenberg, and an equivalent of Gutenberg in Europe is Europeana, and I have no idea about that. It says that it's a multi-language collection of all kinds of printed documentation, and includes audio recordings of notable people, places, newspapers, and that's pretty much the same saying that Project Gutenberg has. There are other languages behind besides English. The most common second language is French, and then I think maybe German, and maybe Spanish. So you can find languages other than English. Google Books has a very large collection of free books, but also intermingled with their own book library where they're trying to sell you some books. And if the book isn't available through them, they'll give a link to someplace where you can buy the book. Amazon Books is pretty much exactly the same thing, although their emphasis is much more on selling you something than providing free books, but they do list some free books.
Dan has something to
You said the project started in 1974, and I'm wondering, it certainly must be a different form then than it is now.
I haven't seen what any of the output looked like from those times, but no, I don't know when it started being HTML rather than plain text. And that was the big improvement, the big change. So the Library of Congress had, no, not Library of Congress, that's not a good example.
So it was just pictures rather than actual text
Yes.
in the early days?
Yes.
Thank you.
Google Books, and I'm not sure, does Google have an e-reader? I should know that, but I don't. Okay. And then, of course, the 800-pound gorilla, Amazon Books. And they are, trying to sell you their books. And the authors don't make squat off this, but it's important for them to get noticed, I guess. A good friend of mine, a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I guess, and her husband wrote a book about his career as a race car driver. And it was kind of an interesting book, especially if you were a race car enthusiast. And she got it entered into the...
Could you go into the finances of this? How much is the budget and who's the money raised from?
Okay, I'll try to. There's no... Oh, no, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm sorry. Tell me again. No? Okay. I don't know anything about the actual finances. I know that there are no paid people. Even the person who started this does not get any money out of it. There may be specific grants to specific people for specific projects, but not at my level or at any level at all, as far as I know. The grants come mainly from the government and other sort of philanthropic organizations. Somebody has to pay for the servers. Somebody has to pay for the time it takes to support and run the servers. The servers are located in Philadelphia, someplace. There's no need for anybody to know. And then everything else is distributed. There's no place, there's no office with a door that says distributed proofreading. and everyone communicates using the website so that there's always a record of what's going on between people, as far as I know. There's always a record. And I don't know if there's anything else I have to say. Oh, there was one other little thing. Almost any electronic device you have can be an e-reader. As I said, I use my iPad. I sometimes use my phone. But as long as you can move a file, a text file, onto the device, you should be able to read it. There's more than one format for electronic books. In fact, there are too many formats for electronic books. EPUB is the basic format, electronic publications, EPUB. And it is very much like the formatting and looks like the formatting for a web page. And they're very similar devices. A web browser takes the plain text. It's in HTML format and formats it according to rules for those instructions. And the book readers do exactly the same thing, except they're formatting books instead of formatting web pages. And so any one book, HTML book, is probably readable on just about any electronic device. If you can move a file to it, you can display it. There isn't much of a need except for maybe something like a web browser.
Karen?
I'll talk loud. Are there any projects like this for audio?
The same project will do audiobooks.
Oh, okay.
And the Library of Congress has some audiobooks. I can't say that I've ever counted or asked how many audiobooks there were, but it would be hard to say. You should also be able to approximately say how many books in French or Spanish or Italian or I don't know what else. I've never seen a book in Klingon. There's a sore need for someone to take on a book in Klingon. Okay. Was it the question? Yes.
Do you have any idea of the usage statistic? Do you have any idea of what the usage statistics are? For example, is there, a big winner of 1 or 2 or 10 or 20 books that are downloaded and read in Project Gutenberg, or some that have never been opened?
Yeah, there are actually probably some that have never been opened. At the beginning of the web page, and if we figure out how to use the laptop, there are statistics, and it says how many people have been on the site doing proofreading, how many books have been processed, how many new books have been entered, and it's usually in the range of maybe 10 to 20 books a week that have been processed and made available. And if you think there's something that's valuable that you don't see there, you can request. There's also a queue of books that have been requested by people. You just have to find a project manager who thinks that's interesting. Yes? Yes. I wanted to show you what a page looks like.
I have a question, just going back to very basics, how you go about digitizing the book. So you first have to obtain the printed version of the book, and then you go and scan each page by page.
The project manager does that, yes.
Okay, so is that something that you would do then in scanning each page, say with your phone, with your iPhone, and then submit it someplace where it gets proofread? Can you go more into details how you get from the printed version to the actual digital version?
Okay. I did have this as a sort of point-by-point list. I'm not sure if we have it. No, it probably isn't there. Okay, so the project manager, who needed no permission except the fact from the lawyers that this is no longer under copyright. From the time that they decide on the book and get it approved, the first thing is to scan each page. And that can be a bit of a challenge, especially for really old books. There were some 17th and 18th, well, it was 18th and 19th century books that were old and had taken a beating. And I don't know how we managed it without breaking the book. Once all the pages have been scanned, then there is one page, one document for every page that was scanned. So there could easily be 400 separate documents, each one representing a page in the book. Then each page, one at a time, is proofread by 3 different people. There's specific software that's available on the internet for anybody, where it will take the page image and put it on the left side of the screen, or maybe on the top of the screen, depending on your preference, and then the scanned text on the right side of the screen. And the proofreader looks at every page, every line, every character, every piece of punctuation, and makes sure that that's been translated correctly into the plain text. As I said, it strips off all the things like italic, underline, boldface, footnotes. Anything that isn't plain text goes away. When that's been done for every page, and everything's to the project manager's approval, it goes on to, and there are three processes, 3 different people, no, 3 different attempts to get rid of as many errors as possible. And that might involve 50 people or 100 people all reading one page at a time. And the next thing that happens is that all the stuff that was stripped out, all the formatting that was stripped out, gets put back in again. And there are 2 steps in formatting. There's somebody who goes and does the initial formatting and marks and says this word was italic, this word was bold, this character is a Hebrew character and it's called this, and this is where you can find it. And it identifies the footnotes too. Yeah. When that's done, and there are 2 steps to that, there's the initial formatting, and then there's the person who reads the formatted text to see if the first person made any mistakes. So at this point, the whole book has been read by, I don't know how many people in 5 different passes. At the end of that, the book should be ready for assembly. So all of the text, all of the pages, all of the images are passed off to somebody who's called this was a job I did for like 8 years, and now I can't remember what I called myself. Well, passed off to the post-processor, that's what I was. I was a post-processor. Passed off to the post-processor, and the post-processor puts the HTML markups back in the text. So this is a table of contents, this is an index. Every page that's referenced in the book, every page that's referenced in the table of contents has a link from the table of contents back to the page number that the line book, that the word was found on. Footnotes are properly formatted. The links to the pictures are inserted, and that's important. The pages are still just text, but the page can point to an image, and it does that. And that's kind of the way the HTML works too. The text is separate from the photos, and your web browser puts them back together again according to the instructions that it's received. When the post-processor is done, it goes on for another person to proofread, which by now is about the 6th or 7th phase for proofreading. It could have involved 50 people or 100 people doing that, but it went through about 7 phases of proofreading. When all of that is done, then the book is made available for something called smooth reading, and that's yet another proofreading thing where someone who who just enjoys reading and is interested in seeing books that they haven't seen before can look in a queue that lists the things that are available for smooth reading and pick up a book and start reading it. And then providing feedback when there was something wrong in the book. By that point, you really hope there isn't any feedback, but there usually is. Once the smooth reading is done and the project manager is happy with it, the project manager will queue it up to be released to Project Gutenberg. The lawyers will probably look at it one more time. I can't believe, as I said before, I can't believe there are lawyers who don't charge, but in this case there are some number of them who don't. And then it is shipped off to Project Gutenberg, which adds it to its catalog. The same thing can happen with music. Although we don't specifically do music, I've worked on books that have music in it, and we have ways of formatting so that you can click on the text and it will play the song for you. But that's in the web browser version of it's not the book that contains the music. The book contains the instructions for playing the music, and the book player understands that and can play that. The trickiest part probably is foreign languages, and a few of the books I read had Hebrew in them, and it isn't particularly that Hebrew is a problem, but Hebrew is a right-to-left language, and so a right-to-left language in the middle of a right-to-left language in the middle of a left-to-right book can make formatting problems. And I don't remember what I did about that. Oh, I contacted somebody in Israel who offered to help and asked him what to do about it, and that was very nice. And I think that's mostly what I have to say about the process. I'd like to show you what the instructions look like in Patty. Oh, you can't do it? Okay. We're stymied by this laptop. We are mostly Macintosh users and don't use laptops at all. And so putting my hands on this browser was instantly confusing. Yeah.
Can you say something about the scanners you use? I don't.
The scanners might be a problem. As far as, when you're scanning the book, you have the binding to contend with. How you
The scanning process isn't probably too gentle on the books, yes. And I don't know what they do with old and valuable books. I don't think we would take on a project from an old and valuable book. I think I've seen books where there were some pages loose, and that's okay. But I don't think I've seen a book that's sort of like completely unbound and trying to do that. Hi, yes?
You would be you.
You.
Are there any books in Japanese or Chinese, and how do you handle the text of the Chinese and Japanese characters?
What you're asking me about is called UTF-8. There's a distressing amount of stuff you have to know. I once worked on a couple of books. One was called Four Little Kittens. It was about 5 pages long, mostly illustrations about little kittens who were born in a garage, and her father let her take the kittens into the house. And then it goes all the way up to nearly overwhelming books that are so difficult to do, you don't really hardly know where to start. Can you think of kind of like an example? Chinese.
The Tale of Genji was one early Japanese book.
When we're done talking here, we can look and see whether any of that's available. I don't remember seeing any Chinese, but there might be Chinese in the Library of Congress catalog. My daughter-in-law is Chinese, and she has no trouble typing on an English keyboard. And therefore it's okay. We mark languages if it's something special, but you don't really need to, because that's something that's handled by the definition of HTML. You put a tag around the text saying, here begins Chinese, and then here ends Chinese. And my daughter-in-law showed me a little bit about how she types, and it's slow. You're probably all familiar, character sets. You're probably all familiar with the ASCII character set, the American Standard Code for Information Interchange, which started at the time computers started. So there was a standard way to represent every letter, every number, and every punctuation in English. And when people started publishing books in other languages, it had to get more serious. And ASCII was expanded by some group that I do not know, probably National Standards Institute, was set up to introduce something called UTF-8, Universal Text Format. And 8 refers to how many bits there are in the character. So you can imagine that if you had the ability to only represent 127 characters, which is what ASCII does, you can only represent 127 characters. That doesn't leave much for even Norwegian or any other language that has its own peculiar letters or accents or things like that. So I don't remember when this was, but I did just read an article about this. Did we write something down about that? No? Good. There was a standardization effort to increase the text format, the characters that could be represented on a computer, from 127 to virtually an unlimited number. I mean, not literally, but virtually an unlimited number. And so it went from UTF-8, which allows 8 bits to define a number that represents a letter, to 16 bits, which represents a number that defines a larger group of letters, all the way up to 64 bits for one letter. Or 64 bits for one letter. It would be much easier to show than describe, but each group of characters has a specific size. So all Chinese characters of a particular my daughter-in-law should be here to explain this to you. So the letters are grouped together, and I don't know what the order is. And as you add more letters or more characters, you have to increase the size of the number that represents which letter it is. So you have a big table, a big table of Chinese characters, old Chinese characters that are no longer in use, Chinese characters as they appear in Taiwan or Formosa or Chinese or Japan, which may have slightly different versions of those characters. There's an incredible number of encodings for those characters. And Chinese takes up almost the entire available space for encoding characters. And English takes up about 127 or something like that, including punctuation.
Yeah, back to English. If somebody's trying to restore a book from the 1700s or something like that, you'd have to have a pretty skilled person who comprehended the changes in our English language over the centuries.
You don't change what the author wrote. Never, never, never. So if the author spelled captain in some obscure way, we spell it the same way. It's the exact image of the book as much as is possible. Was that what you were asking?
Yeah, I was thinking they'd have to interpret more of what was in the text, but apparently not.
I'm sure there must be cases where no one knows what that is that the person is talking about, or what that little mark is. I've seen squiggles that I don't I have no idea what it is.
You can get that from current student papers.
Yes. And one comfort for me, because I'm at the bottom of the food chain here, in distributed proofreading, the comfort for me is that I can escalate this. And somebody who knows about, say, polytonic Greek, or some version of Egyptian hieroglyphics, and we have characters for those, who knows those things much better than I ever could explain to me how I should insert them in the document so that they're displayed properly. Because someplace in this ocean of tens of thousands of character slots is the right character for any one of those things. I really think that you'd be hard-pressed to find a language that can't be represented in this thing called UTF-8, Universal Text Format. And it'd be interesting to know if there were. Anything else? No?
Fine, just over here.
Here, here.
Turn back.
Okay.
If you want to read one of these books, you put it on your computer and then can you keep it
Yes?
for a long time?
Perfect.
Forever?
It's yours.
Oh, okay.
That's the essence of being public. There'd be no reason, I mean, you could delete it. It doesn't hurt anybody. I have quite a library of books. I worked on producing I worked on producing the final versions of like 405 books. And what's his name? Hans Holbein was one that I was most proud of. And they're my books, insofar as I made the books, but anybody could take a copy of it and do whatever they want with it. I have no control.
You pass that to Fred, please.
I think many of us have used e-books and they have a great advantage. But I think the future of e-books has got to go in a little different direction. About 20 years ago, I put together an e-book, but it was a multimedia e-book on speech articulation. We included such things as X-ray motion pictures of the vocal tract during speech production. We could put in information on a graph that was changing over time to show the effect of the respiratory system on the pressure across the vocal folds and so on. Color, movement, sound, an ability to enter the appendix or to define a word that was used in the text and all of the textbook and so on. But I think looking at a multimedia approach is a good move in the right direction as we move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've done maybe 5 or 6 books that have at least a snippet of music in them. I can't say that I've done anything very sophisticated, like maybe a page or a page and a half of a sea chanty or something like that. I can't remember.
How precise do you have to be in your search engine to get into the system and to look at see what's available in a particular area without getting a lot of stuff from outside?
I don't know where the outside stuff would come from.
I'm sorry?
I don't know where outside stuff would come from. No one keeps any track of what you've done or what you've looked at or what your expressed interests were. Nobody cares.
So in your search engine, you would refer to the particular project? Is that the way you would go in?
I think of a project as a book, and I don't know how much more complicated. Some of the things that you said probably can't be done easily. One of the things that I don't know how you would do would be interactive graphics. So, I haven't seen a tool that lets you move a slider around and see what the effect of that is. But almost anything else, might find in presenting information as a whole. I think the interactive part is not part of the HTML for books. That's more like a website thing. It has to be specific to a book. Really? Great. Oh, yes?
Sorry, keep asking.
No, it's good.
Please wait, please wait. We can't hear you.
I know. I was going for Barry's microphone because it was closer. Anyway, seems like this would be an opening for AI.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know what the capabilities of artificial intelligence are for scanning text, reading text.
I'm thinking of the retrieval end of things too.
Oh.
So in other words, part of my question is, I'm a librarian. I know how to search a traditional catalog. Don't do it very often, but I do have that skill somewhere in my brain. But it seems to me that if I wanted to see what was in Project Gutenberg, I don't have a clue as to how I would do that. Would I put it in as a text string? You know, would I try to, is it cataloged in any traditional way, or what? Is it just locked?
There are no Library of Congress numbers associated with the entries. I wish we could have figured out how to do this with the laptop. If you want to pursue this, you can just come by and I'll show you on a computer which I actually know how to steer.
Yeah. Well, that's great, because I live here at UH. Somebody, is out in, Nebraska, that's a little bit more difficult.
No.
I was just curious.
I don't think there's anything you can search for other than plain text.
Yeah, okay. Just
But I think the plain text could include the entire book, an entire book.
Thank you. Just getting back to the process of producing these things. Suppose you find a real typo in the original. Do you try to correct that, or do you just leave it?
There are a couple kinds of mistakes, and sometimes it's just a matter of judgment, and I would leave that to the project manager. But there are the mistakes where the typesetter set a letter upside down. There are mistakes where the type is broken and you can't tell whether it's a P or an R. And they're just spelling mistakes. And in some cases, depending on your experience, it's up to you what you do with it. You can, I've had cases where I've referred to other editions of the book to see if I could find the same paragraph in a different version of the book and see if this thing that appears to be a mistake is still there. That doesn't happen very often, though. The other kinds of problems, like errors of fact, if somebody tries to say when, say, the Declaration of Independence was ratified, or whatever that process is called, and they get it wrong, we don't fix it. It stays the way the author wrote it. Okay, are there other situations you can think of?
Well, I'm just trying to see how, if you change the original text for any reason.
If there's a continuum here, there's not one right or wrong question. I would always punt it up to the project manager if I couldn't figure this out. But there's the case where the letter is broken, the type is broken. 2 letters have been interchanged, or a person's name was spelled Bill in 14 places, but in one place it appears as pill. The proofreaders leave it and insert a note for the formatters and the project managers and the people who finally put the book together. So at the proofreading level, you don't make decisions much. You say, I think this is a problem, and insert that into the text.
Do you know what the largest book in terms of, say, number of pages is that you've Gutenberg group has ever done.
No. And unfortunately, we haven't figured out how to use the browser on the laptop, so. But again, if you want to stop by, I can give you more of a demonstration, and we can see if we can query things like that. I don't think it's something anybody cares about, but not for practical reasons, but just for fun, to find out what to look at the most pages or least pages, or the most different foreign languages, but actual list of languages occurred in the book.
Okay, another question. Really? Long way from the scriptorium, right?
Barry, has there been any collision with potentially competitive for-profit activities?
No, because the book is in public, we pretty much guaranteed that the book is in the public domain. There's nothing they can do about that. But I haven't heard even of anybody trying that. Of course, I'm so low on the totem pole that I really wouldn't hear that sort of stuff. A project manager might, but not me.
Barry, thanks so much.
Well, you're welcome.
It's really
This is
fascinating.